I think the best way to do this, it's good many of you have not had a chance to read the introduction or the Pelagius chapter, which I think is really excellent. It's well worth reading. So I hope you'll be able to catch up. But today, I think it would be most helpful if I simply lead through the chapter, and any of you may interrupt with your own observations if you've read it, or if you haven't, with your own questions. Sylvia, have a seat. Let me turn my camera. Sorry to all of you watching this electronically. This is just the way things happen. All right. From John Philip Newell's introduction, we know things in the core of our being that we have not necessarily been taught. And some of this deep knowing may actually be at odds with what our society or religion has tried to teach us. This book is about reawakening to what we have known in the depths of our being, that the earth is sacred, and that this sacredness is at the heart of every human being and life form. To awaken again to this deep knowing is to be transformed in the way we choose to live and relate and act. This time together is, from my perspective, not primarily academic. I really want us to have a feel of greater connectedness to the earth and creation as something of God, not something that is alien. And I believe what John Philip has said in this opening paragraph, that we need to reawaken to that as an awareness that is instinctive. I think it was when we were studying Marcus Borg 3 or 4 years ago, I can't remember exactly when, but we'd been in the study for several weeks, and Marcus Borg, I think, although he doesn't claim Celtic origin, a lot of his thinking is very much in harmony with what we'll be studying in this book. And one of you said, "Is it okay to believe this stuff? It's what I've thought for years." And what I think is a major error that has happened in Western Christianity going back to 314, when the Emperor Constantine made Christianity the religion of the empire, we have been repressed. And the imperial power of Rome, joined with the power of the church as it grew, and I think has repressed free thinking, imaginative thinking, in favor of control. We can argue that point, but that's one of the perspectives with which I approach our history together. So, Pelagius. Let me just see if there's other stuff in the introduction that is really important. It's good background. You'll remember one of the cardinal points is Rome never got here or here, and really not into Wales either. And so those areas on the fringes of civilization had as their background tribal culture that was more intimate, that kings were more like country squires than potentates. So keep that kind of distinction in mind. The Celtic spiritual tradition is one that has long emphasized an awareness of the sacred essence of all things. What is unique about the Celtic tradition compared to most other Western traditions is that it cannot be reduced to a set of doctrines or beliefs. Instead, at its core, is the conviction that we essentially need to keep listening to what our soul already knows, either in the particular circumstances of our lives or in matters more universal. So, I will start with, just jump right into Pelagius. The introduction is all good background. In Celtic wisdom, we remember that our soul, the very heart of our being, is sacred. What is deepest in us is of God. Every child, every woman, every man, and every life form is in essence divine. This is the truth that Pelagius invites us to remember. Pass that picture around. That picture, where did you find it?
It was a Christmas card, and I saved it because of the comments that you made about that.
Okay. Pass it around, and you will see it is, that is a very Pelagian Christmas card. You'll get the point when you see it. Around 50s, the Christian era, a shift began to occur in parts of the Celtic world. Remember that the Celtic world stretched from Turkey in the east to Spain and in the west, and north into British Isles, in Scotland and Ireland, and Elizabeth Place. And so St. Paul, in his writing to the Galatians were Turkish Celts. And so the Celtic tradition, and Paul had a particular affection for the Galatian congregation. If you read the letters, that is by far the most affectionate and personal of the letters that Paul wrote. It contrasts dramatically with the Corinthians, whom he was beating up on the whole time as being contentious and schismatic and needing to be straightened out about there is no Greek or female or bond or free, we're all one. And they seem to have been an argumentative bunch from the way Paul speaks to them. And there was a deep receptivity within Celtic culture to this new idea that in Christ we see divinity. And so that's a mysterious kind of thing. You see this? And that mystery was not particularly problematic for the Celtic worldview. The Celts apparently had a sense of the unity of the divine and holy. It's why they would worship in outdoors more than in buildings. The circle that is the center of the Celtic cross, representing all of creation, there is an essential unity within Celtic thought between creation and the grace of God, that they are not opposed to each other, as Augustine tended to teach. And Augustine is the major nemesis to Western thought.
That's what Richard Rohr teaches constantly, the unity of all creation.
Yeah, Rohr has got a big Celtic spirit, I think.
Yeah, I think you'll see that.
Yeah. He's a Franciscan, and the Franciscans are very much in that tradition and have been for a long time. The message of Christ entered the Celtic world not in fixed written form, but in more fluid spoken form. This made way for a rich intermingling of Christian and pre-Christian wisdom. Talked about that. It's what the cross is about. It's the marriage of that pre-Christian natural knowledge. Remember, the word pagan means of the country. just means natural. It is not evil. Pagan is attentive to creation. First Christian teacher of significance to emerge in Celtic territory was Irenaeus of Lyon in the 2nd century, 140 to 202, and he had studied in Asia Minor, in Galatia. And Irenaeus and John, the writer, John the gospel writer, remember, John was probably writing around early 90-95 AD. He's the latest of the apostles, of the gospel writers to write, but comes from a fairly strong verbal tradition that probably does go back to very close to the time of Jesus himself. And that opening hymn at the beginning, the prologue of John, is big in Celtic awareness. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. As John goes on to say, everything had come into being through the Word. Everything is essentially, everything that we can see, everything we can touch, everything we can be a part of, is essentially an utterance of the divine. Creation is itself a sacred sounding. This is all of the Word. Each creature and life form a unique and unrepeatable expression of the One. There is a core unity in all that exists because it has been spoken into existence by the divine. This is background to Pelagius, but it's important. There are 3 passionate concerns that emerge in Irenaeus' writing. Remember, he was part of, I'm looking at page 15 if any of you want to look, but you don't have to. I think it's fine if we just, and stop me, interrupt, challenge, whatever you want to do. First, he was opposed to the way in which celibacy, even as early as the 2nd century, was beginning to be seen in Mediterranean Christianity as a higher part than marital union. Think about that for a moment. We idealized, and celibacy is an idealization of something that is not natural. It's sort of nuts if we think about it. And it has suddenly led to all kinds of problems that are sort of bubbling up to the surface constantly. It is natural for, it's the procreative act, making love, it's what we do. So that is one of the problems that Irenaeus saw developing even in the 2nd century. Second, Irenaeus was concerned about a tendency to dilute the robust humanity of Jesus. Jesus is early on being idealized, and there is a heresy called Docetism, which says that Jesus only seems to be human. He's actually divine, sort of cloaked in humanity. Which, if you think about it, is nuts. It goes against all that we can possibly know. You have to do mental gymnastics to be able to arrive at the fact that Sylvia is not a person. And it's just silly. And Irenaeus saw it as dangerous in that it again repudiates the sacredness of matter. It tries to make Jesus into something that is immaterial. So, and it seems to me that the whole concept of incarnation is one of the most distinctive and gracious things about Christian tradition faith. And as long as we don't think that that divinity is exclusive to Jesus, I think that, and well, there's lots in our tradition that says that Jesus is the second Adam. He's fully human.
I know that there's a little magazine that's put up by the Franciscans. I think it's called St. Anthony or something like that. And I was reading an article where the writer was looking at the Greek word logos. In the beginning was the word of the logos. And apparently, at least some translations of it are the conversation, as opposed to just a single word, but the conversation. In the beginning was the conversation. The conversation was God. The conversation was in God. It's relational, as opposed to just
Static. Fabulous. Yes. Let me free associate with that for a moment. Because, I think it says it somewhere in here. I can't remember where I get some things, but the root meaning of both Greek and Hebrew for God is action. It is relationship. It is flow. Flow is probably the best word. The whole concept of God is one of motion and connection and relatedness. If you think about the Trinity, how many of you are children from 3 children families? Several are. The richness of relationship amongst 3 people is much different from the relationship between 2. There's only one relationship between 2. There are 6 possible relationships amongst 3.
yeah.
And so the whole idea of the Trinity is not just that it's a conversation, but that it is a dynamic and constantly evolving conversation. And it isn't about mathematics. It's about experience. The whole concept of Trinity, which I think is brilliant. And I love the concept of the Trinity.
It's also like 3 in 1. There's 3 here, but they're all wrapped in 1. So that to me helps me understand. That's not poison ivy. helps me understand the concept is that it's not 3 sets. Yeah, I thought of it growing up as this triangle. Thumb here is a pointer, and it's nothing relational, nothing dynamic or even alive. It's just a geometrical concept. But this is not geometrical. This was alive.
It's even messy.
Yeah.
Jack brings in these parables from nature every week. The essential interwovenness of creation, everything belongs together.
The Celtic art is that, right?
Okay. The divine to be cherished within the earthliness of human life and relationship. Irenaeus' third concern touches on the implications of reawakening to the body of the universe as sacred. He was concerned about a teaching that was gaining ground in 2nd century Christianity, later known as creatio ex nihilo, creation out of nothing. It taught that a distant creator, purely transcendent, had fashioned matter out of nothing. Against this, Irenaeus taught that the universe is born out of the substance of God, not out of nothing. There's a big distinction there. If creation itself is an expression of God, then it is by its very nature sacred. If it is God just tinkering with stuff I'm not sure how to draw the distinction. And does that make any sense, people? I think that's core. Creation ex nihilo means that the stuff of creation is neutral. It comes from nothing in particular. Whereas if it comes from the essence of God, it is not neutral. Creation.
So what does it say in Genesis? Because it doesn't say that it comes from the essence of God. It says God made. And I'm not arguing. I just it's different from the verb coming from the essence of something versus God made such and such. Isn't that what the Genesis says?
Yeah, I think the Genesis is telling a story, and Irenaeus is arguing philosophy, I think, at this point. It's a slightly different sort of area.
Well, it says in the beginning, God. God. In the, that is, before time. The God, meaning, if we're talking about the relationship, the action, the energy, not something dead. If you see God in that way, so it's there in the beginning, that thing, that beauty, that sacredness, that's how I take it when I read, in the beginning, God created God.
Yeah, that might be a weak point, a weak distinction to make. But the importance of matter is underlined again in that prologue. The word became flesh. The conversation became flesh. The expression of God became flesh. Not looking like sort of flesh, and materialism is at the heart of Christianity. It's a very materialistic faith. Nothing about it can exist without this incarnate person that we begin with. Keep going. The doctrine of creation ex nihilo formally declared that the earth consists of a substance that is neutral, not sacred. This gave the empire a type of permission to do whatever it wished with material things. It set the stage for how Christianity was to be used by empires again and again over the centuries to sanction their exploitation of the earth. Sounds fairly contemporary.
I think for me, it's also one of the prime reasons for the anti-abortion folks. It's not just the sacredness of human life; it's the sacredness of God's creation. And when you're denying that, you're killing off a part of God at the same time. It's just. It goes so much farther for me than just the human life.
I think what made a strong impression on me is in the last 10 years or so, science has, at least I discovered it through reading, that the particles that are within stars, whatever they are, minerals, combinations of things, every single piece of that is in us. That's startling when you think about it. That's almost a proof of God. That everything is connected.
Didn't Carl Sagan say we're the stuff of stars? Is that what he said? Something like that? We're the stuff of stars.
You know the scientific part that I'm trying to get to.
Every element up to iron is in a star at all times. And we prove this by analyzing the light from the star. The way that we get heavier elements all the way up to uranium is in supernovas. When it explodes, then the atoms are crushed together and the nuclei expand and become other elements.
Barbara and I have our gravestones already in place and with epitaphs on them, and Barbara's reads "Elemental Stardust." Am I off to an angle there? It looks to me as if the thing is at an angle.
Oh, honey,
Yes.
you're
Well, she's a-
always a few
A little bit off.
A little bit off.
Yeah.
It's perspective, Martin.
Yeah. Well, if she's elemental stardust, what are you?
Trying to, oh, I'm embarrassing. I am the ninth Bishop of Easton. Irenaeus saw Christ not in opposition to this deep natural knowing, but as a radical affirmation of it. Christ, he said, is the recapitulation of the Word through which everything came into being. So Irenaeus saw Christ not as a new word, a word that is somehow over against what is deepest in the earth and the human mystery. Rather, he saw Christ as re-speaking the sacred essence of the universe, resounding the divine that is at the heart of all things. This was to see Christ as reawakening in humanity what it has forgotten. And as we read through the book, see if it sounds familiar to you from some internal awareness. This is not a seeking of academic stuff, although it's obviously got academic content. It is not until the 4th century that we receive anything like a historical account of Celtic Christianity in Britain. By this stage in Rome, Mediterranean Christianity had become the imperial religion. That was declared in 314 by Constantine, and then only 10 years later, 11 years later, he convened the Council of Nicaea. Imperial religion, Constantine, wanted things clear. He didn't like the messiness of multiple traditions, which Christianity had. There are many gospels that never made it into the Bible. I think the ones they got were pretty good, and I'm not arguing that the canon should be expanded, but there were multiple traditions that thought of Jesus in different ways and understood him in different ways. And some of them I think were balmy, but there was still a spectrum. There was a spectrum of ways of understanding. But Constantine wanted a uniformity of practice and of belief. And he got it from the Nicene Creed. And it has held pretty strongly. And while I do all kinds of mental gymnastics inside my head about what some of those words mean, I can recite the creed without crossing my fingers. I'm not worried that I'm somehow speaking untruth. You're frowning. It's difficult to read faces without so, the first writer and teacher of significance in Celtic Britain was a monk from Wales, up here somewhere, named Pelagius. He lived from 360 to 430, so he had a decent length of time, 70 years. He is perhaps the most misrepresented Christian teacher of all time. And that misrepresentation is the fault of, largely, Augustine. The misrepresentation is threefold. First, it is usually taught that there is no writing available from the hand of Pelagius, which means that all that can be learned about his teaching comes through the mouth of his theological opponent, Augustine. We know now that there are plenty of writings available from Pelagius, which gives us a fuller picture of what he actually taught. The second part of the problem of knowing what is Pelagius' own writing was that he wrote under pseudonyms, and I think he mentions this. And one of his favorite pseudonyms after he was excommunicated was Augustine. He wrote pretending that he was Augustine.
Are you referring to Augustine of Hippo, or?
No, this is Augustine of Hippo, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we won't get to Augustine of Canterbury for another 3 years, three centuries, I mean.
True.
Yes. So, misrepresentation. The second misrepresentation is that there is usually no indication of where Pelagius came from. And that is not correct either. Pelagius, it's easier to dismiss him if he's just, as he says here, a one-off heretic. But if he is speaking out of tradition that has got roots, history, and a community of support, then that's a different thing. It's more difficult to dismiss a culture. What we know is that he was a Celt from Wales, and that what he was teaching was not the idiosyncrasy of one particular teacher, but rather a vision at the heart of the Celtic mission. The third and most widespread misrepresentation of all the assumptions is that Pelagius believed we do not need grace, that humanity has the capacity to somehow save itself. I was taught that. I was taught that that's what Pelagius said in seminary. And when I was on the board of Virginia Theological Seminary, I asked the then dean, could we please have a course in Celtic tradition and theology? And it was dismissed as New Age dingbat stuff. And that has been the belittling condescension towards Celtic tradition for decades. But there is too much history, too much narrative that this guy puts together, I think, better than most, with the roots being clear. Yes, Jack?
Maybe I'm trying to remember right that the objection to Pelagius was that he did not, specifically is that he did not believe that we are saved from our sinful nature by grace. He believed that grace reconnects us to creation. That grace is an act of reconnection to who we already are.
Yes.
What's already there.
That's, I think, fair.
Which is good stuff. God don't make that jump, you know.
Pelagius taught that grace was given to reconnect us to our nature, which was sacred and made of God. That's a carefully worded sentence, I think. Made of God. Is creation itself God, or is it made from God, of God? I think that's a good ambiguity to preserve. Divine grace is given not to make something other than or more than natural. It is given to make us truly natural, to restore us to the sacred essence of our being. So the function of grace, and Pelagius thought that it was necessary, essential, is to restore us to our broken nature. He has no difficulty in saying sin is real, or that we can fix it ourselves, but that it is a denial of our nature to which we need to be restored. Okay. Pelagius was teaching as a closer examination of the criticism made clear. First, he was accused by Jerome, whose Latin Bible was the Vulgate. He was a brilliant scholar. Part of the problem within Christian tradition is that some of the greatest minds have been wrong about some things. It really is a shame. It's true.
He spent all of his time in a cave looking at a skull.
Well, he could have had problems with depression, right? But Jerome, who was himself an extreme ascetic, accused Pelagius of spending too much time with women, teaching them how to read and interpret the scriptures, which obviously he shouldn't have been doing. So there'll be 4 of us here next week. Jerome says that Pelagius was continually among their spindles and wickerwork, as if that is all women might be doing. Already by the 4th century in Rome, the place of the feminine had been so subordinated within imperial Christianity that it was regarded as unacceptable for Pelagius to be teaching women to study and access scriptural learning. The reality is that Pelagius was simply doing in Rome what the norm was in the Celtic tradition, celebrating the sacredness of women and honoring their role in the study of wisdom. So the tradition, and I want to emphasize this over and over again, the Celtic Christian tradition grounds itself in pre-Christian wisdom, just as the rest of Western religion grounds itself in pre-Christian religion and wisdom of the Old Testament. They were both tribal cultures, both closely connected to nature. Remember, the Old Testament was highly natural, and the appearances of God are in things like fire and on mountaintops, and the New Testament, especially under Pauline influence, becomes urban. It's a different kind of culture, and the Celtic tradition tries to remarry those distinct traditions and re-honor the natural. Using a highly derisive word, Jerome described those who chose to study with Pelagius as Amazons. The term means without breasts, and in 4th century Rome, long before the European discovery of South America, Jerome was implying that women who chose to read and study were denying their femininity. The second principle, this will sound crazy to us, the second principal criticism of Pelagius concerned his hairstyle. This may not seem a profound concern. Behind it lay one of imperial religion's biggest fears. The Roman clerical tonsure, friar tuck kind of thing, a sign of priesthood, was characterized by a shaved crown surrounded by a ring that symbolized the crown of thorns that Jesus had at the crucifixion. Pelagius, on the other hand, wore what came to be known as the Celtic tonsure, which consisted of longish hair on the back, on the top and back, with the sides and back
Like a bowl cut.
shaved most closely. Essentially, the Celtic tonsure had been the Druidic tonsure, one of the symbols of priesthood of pre-Christian Celtic religion. It spoke of the Celtic mission as standing in continuity with the Druidic wisdom that had gone before it. For those in Rome, Pelagius had arrived looking like a pagan. The third and primary criticism of Pelagius focused on his belief that when we look into the face of a newborn child, there's that wonderful Christmas card, we are looking into the face of God freshly born among us. Pelagius was not speaking merely of the newborn child, he was speaking also of what is deepest in every human being. He was enunciating the dignity of our human nature, as he put it, not the defilement of our nature. He was emphasizing our sacredness over our sinfulness. Pelagius was teaching that what is deepest in us is of God, not opposed to God, not in opposition. The Doctrine of Original Sin, which was formulated most clearly by Augustine, a contemporary of Pelagius, said that we are broken beyond repair, except it does concede that we are repaired by Jesus, by the crucifixion and the atonement of Christ, which he never explains very well. And over against that idea of original sin, Matthew Fox, a contemporary Franciscan who got excommunicated because of teaching this, that no, we are born in original grace, original blessing. That he wrote called Original Blessing. And he was forbidden ever to teach again. He was a Roman Catholic Franciscan. And he is now an Episcopalian, by the way. And so he was excommunicated for teaching. And it seems to me that if we take Scripture at all seriously in the story of creation, we are born of God. And that the image of God still resides in us. And that we need to fan it into flames occasionally. We do need grace to do that. But our core is holy, not sinful, not vile. Augustine did not believe that. Augustine had horrible things to say about women. To look into the face of a woman is to look into the vile depths of depravity. Yeah, and that's pretty close to an exact quote.
Basically run amok as a young man, and then he tried to find his way back.
Yeah.
I blamed it on everybody else.
I like this one infamous line, may be chaste but not yet.
Yes.
Not speaking from experience, I hope.
I do want to ask at this point, somewhere I read that the Eastern Orthodox Church, which of course geographically is in that realm of the Celtic tradition that spreads from
Turkey.
the middle, from Turkey up, didn't go along with that and still don't. Is that a piece of this? I think it makes it more.
Yeah, it's written in the Pelagius chapter that we're going over, and I don't know the traditions of Eastern Orthodoxy well enough to be very confident about that, but.
But it's nice to know it's not just one man that we're attacking about this, but that maybe there was a stream of thought bigger than that.
Exactly.
That was in contention with the Empire of Rome.
There are a number of things between the Celtic tradition and the Orthodox tradition that are in complete harmony. Most obviously is the dating of Easter. The dating of Easter, if any of you have awareness of Celtic and of Orthodox dating of Easter, it's usually a week or 2 or sometimes 3 weeks later than ours. Can it be earlier? I think it probably can be earlier. But rarely is Easter celebrated on the same day in any given year by both Western and Eastern Christians, Orthodox Christians. And that comes from a different reading of the text. The Western culture grounds its dating in the Gospels particularly of Matthew, and the way Matthew tells the story of the crucifixion. The Orthodox branches of Christendom and the Celts based their dating on the way John tells the story, the 4th Gospel, and that had to be repressed as far as the Roman tradition was concerned. Imperial religion likes uniformity. As religion developed, Christian faith developed, particularly in Europe, there was one central dude, the Bishop of Rome, and to that position accrued more and more, not just religious authority, but also political power. Real political power. Nobody could become a king in Europe without papal blessing. Contrast that against the patriarchal tradition of orthodoxy. There were patriarchs in Antioch, Jerusalem, where else? Alexandria, Constantinople. So the authority in orthodoxy was more conciliar rather than strictly hierarchical. The authority was not mamby-pamby, it was pretty tough within orthodoxy, but it wasn't a unitary authority and
So
power.
it's not a pope as such
people.
Eastern
Exactly,
Orthodox.
right. And in 1054, the Great Schism happened, and the Bishop of Rome, on some theological point, which is not minor, but a theological point, excommunicated the four patriarchs of Constantinople, Antioch, Alexandria, and Jerusalem. You guys are excommunicated. And they turned around and said, no, you are. And
Good
so,
Interestingly, years ago, there was a family that moved to Cumberland that was Greek, and they came here and not the Catholic Church.
right.
And I was always confused by that, because I thought, well, the Catholic seems more closely aligned to Orthodox, but no, they came here.
Still.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was raised in a very Anglo-Catholic parish and was told by my rector, if you're on vacation and you can't find an Episcopal church, go to an Orthodox church.
Oh, okay.
Chances of finding an Orthodox church where you
Yeah.
can't find an Episcopal church are somewhat slim most places. And it's 10 to 10, and I've got to go vest. And we are I gabble too much. Do please, if you can't get the book locally, as I said before some of you arrived, I ordered the book for David last Saturday, and he got it on Tuesday
Yeah.
from Amazon.
Amazon.
And it's actually cheaper. So,
So you wonder why Jeff Bezos calls his organization Amazon? Amazon this morning.
I don't know. I don't have
I
time for
don't
that.
wanna go there.
So, I gotta run.
You're a
I'll
lady,
see you at
you
church.
think about
Thank
that
you all very
more.
much. Let's hope that we can meet here next week. And did you all get, a quick question, did I send it out? The manuscript for my opening lecture,
Yes.
which is, you did get it.
Yeah.
Did I send it to you, Kitty?
No.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
I don't
meant
think
to.
I got it either.
Probably if that first day, you're gonna sign up on that.
I think it might
Sheet.
be on the Facebook
Yeah, that could be.
website, I think.
Oh, the text?
Oh,
Not
no,
ju-
no, the actual film, what we're doing.
Yeah,
No,
the
no,
text has got a lot more stuff in it than Phil has.
Are we through?
Tuesday,
Did I miss it
I think
somewhere?
so.
I'll send it to you.
This is
I
gonna
think
be,
you'll like it.
is he?
please.
All right.
Is that it?
Yep.